Look at 18th century North America without the borders or cities. At this scale, the continent was a landscape defined by distance and total isolation. Before engines existed, the primary constraint on growth was friction. Moving heavy raw materials over dirt roads using horses and wagons was incredibly slow and expensive compared to floating them on water. This physical reality trapped the early United States against the Atlantic coastline. The Appalachian Mountains stood as a dense, 1,000-mile wall of rock and forest that effectively cut the colonies off from the rest of the landmass. You could settle the interior, but you couldn't affordably move your products out. Transporting a ton of wheat over those mountains often cost more than the market value of the wheat itself, making the vast, fertile center of the continent economically inaccessible. But the center of the map held a massive physical advantage: the Mississippi River watershed. It is the largest continuous, navigable river system on Earth. It provided a natural path through the mountain barrier. Whoever controlled this specific water network would manage the primary flow of all trade and resources for the entire interior. To understand the efficiency of this system, look at the inputs. The Missouri, the Ohio, and the Arkansas rivers all feed into one central artery. This network perfectly overlays the American Midwest, the most expansive, contiguous stretch of fertile farmland on the planet. Because water flows downhill, the system functions as a gravity-fed conveyor belt. A farmer could load a harvest onto a flatboat, and the natural current would automatically move that wealth southward toward the coast, without requiring any external power. However, millions of square miles of watershed, and all of the goods they produced, poured out through a single geographic choke point, the port of New Orleans. When Thomas Jefferson negotiated the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, he was specifically targeting that port. The United States needed to own the valve that connected the entire American interior to the global economy. America's natural geography created a ready-made economic monopoly, but its survival depended on controlling that single southern exit. Early on, this system had a strict physical limitation. It only moved one way. You could float timber and grain down to New Orleans, but fighting the current back upriver was nearly impossible for heavy loads. That limitation was removed in the early 19th century with the widespread adoption of the steam-powered riverboat. Steam engines finally provided the massive mechanical force required to push heavy, manufactured goods against the natural current. Within decades, steam power transformed the river into a heavy-lift transit corridor, capable of moving resources in both directions. This two-way exchange of raw materials going down and industrial goods coming up directly funded the growth of major inland hubs, turning strategic places like St. Louis into massive, booming centers of wealth. Steam engines fully utilized the river's geography, dramatically increasing the speed of internal expansion. Surrounded by railroads and interstate highways, it is easy to assume the river is now a relic of the past. This chart shows that the Mississippi River still handles hundreds of millions of tons of grain, petroleum, and steel every year. In terms of sheer volume, it outpaces large segments of the modern rail and truck networks. Look at the scale of a single modern towboat. It can push a fleet of cargo barges carrying the same payload as over 1,000 semi-trucks, all at a fraction of the fuel cost. Keeping this system reliable requires massive engineering. The river is regulated by a modern network of dams and locks that maintain water levels for continuous transit year-round. If the Mississippi River were to vanish, the American Midwest would lose its primary logistical artery. The cost of exporting food would skyrocket, causing immediate disruptions to the global economy. The Mississippi River is more than a landscape feature. It is the literal geographic foundation upon which the nation's economic influence was built.